Before we get started on this podcast, I want to announce that our 250th episode is next week. As such, we will be playing another round of Advocates of Great Television. This is an event in which we all pick an episode from a series of television, and then we all watch that episode before the podcast, the 250th podcast, and then discuss those episodes. So each person participating picks an episode. Next week, we might end up having a special guest join us. Regardless of whether or not they join us, they did present a pick for this episode, and we will discuss that. So if you want to watch along with us, here are the shows that we will be talking about. Tiger King, Season 1, Episode 3, The Secret. Community, Season 2, Episode 14, Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. And Justified, Season 1, Episode 1, Fire in the Hole. So if you want to join us in our discussion of these episodes, you can watch these ahead of next week's podcast, which we will be recording on the 13th of April. So if you can watch those episodes before the 13th of April and want to send us a comment or question that we will read on the air and discuss, send the comment to either at Tyson Gifford on Twitter or at Voxel Hero. That is at TysonGifford or at VOXELHERO. So check it out and join us next week for Advocates of Great Television. And now to begin the show. Total Screen proudly presents the Weekly Set Podcast with Tyson Gifford and William Rohrig. Episode 249, recorded April 6, 2020. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Weekly Set, the official podcast of the Total Screen. I am your host. My name is Tyson, and joining me today, as always, is my partner here at the Total Screen, William Rohrig.
Hello.
So today we are talking about Lost. Particularly, we are talking about Lost Season 3. This is part of our active Lost rewatch, where we've been watching an episode a day and then discussing each season as we finish them. So we finished Season 3, 2 days ago?
Yes. So Saturday was, I believe, the day I finished Season 3.
Yeah, because I've already watched the first episode of Season 4, and I'm watching the second episode after we record this.
I watched the second episode earlier today. So good. So very good. So I want to ask you, what were your general thoughts on Season 3?
So Season 3, I could, let's say, even before we started the rewatch, my thoughts on Season 3 had always been that the first half was really weak, and then the second half was really strong. And I always tied that in my head to remembering there were interviews, there was all sorts of stuff going on during Season 3, all sorts of this, background discussion going on between the showrunners, Damon Lindelof and Carlton Cuse, where they were talking about wanting to end Lost, wanting it to come to an end, and ABC really just kind of wanting to have it go on forever and ever.
Right.
But Damon Lindelof and Carlton Cuse, they had an ending in sight, and they wanted to get to an ending, and they didn't want to tread water for too long. And to me, that's what Season 3 was in my memory of Season 3. Looking back on it was Lost treading water until they got confirmation that that they were going to get their time to end their series. And then it picked up. It picked up steam for the second half of the season. That was my initial impression, looking back on it. Rewatching it, I don't think that the first half of Season 3 was as bad as I remember it being.
Right.
It wasn't as slow. There's definitely some issues that are treading water issues. Nikki and Paolo, a lot of the stuff happening in the others camp just felt like it was heavily treading water, nothing was really happening. But stuff picked up a lot sooner than I remembered it happening before.
Yeah, definitely. Yes. So my thoughts were, I remember when I originally watched Lost, I remember this season being the season that cemented it for me as this is one of the greatest shows of all time. This is where I said, I think the issues that you're talking about probably are issues that stem from the problems the second season had, because the second season, like I said before, was incredibly weak. And I think what was happening going from the second season going into this season is that after a strong first season setting up the concept, the season one being like a proof of concept and them kind of nailing that, I believe that they were trying to find their footing from there. And I believe that was a bit tougher process. Apparently for watching it, that seemed like a bit of a tougher process, but I believe around, I'd say maybe like episode 8, even maybe episode 7 of this season, it really picks up. And I believe this is where Lost finds its stride. Because once it picks up in the season, it starts running and it never looks back. I mean, it just builds and builds.
Except looking back for Jack to spike the football.
Yeah, that was horrible. Yeah. And the Nikki and Paolo episode was terrible too. But
I don't think Nikki and Paolo's episode was terrible. I think Nikki and Paolo were terrible. But I actually thought the episode itself was kind of cool because it played on our expectation. It played on fans hating the fact that Nikki and Paolo were just like shoehorned into the show. And so the episode was almost like a meta parody of that. And then it ended on a great like Twilight Zone-esque like ending.
You know what? Yeah, because I remember when I watched it, I texted you and I admitted that I appreciated the episode a lot more on this rewatch than when I had initially seen it. I think my big issue when I initially watched it is because they did like all these basically like flashbacks to earlier like episodes in the series where they obviously weren't involved, but then they were suddenly there. Yeah. And I'm just like, that they weren't there for that. That wasn't a thing. And I was like, I guess like I was just annoyed by that the first time around. And I think once you can get over like that aspect of it, that there's a lot of like a winks and nods and some smart commentary in here. And also like can't gloss over the fact that Expose is the episode where Charlie redeems himself. People say like, oh, no, he redeemed himself. No, to redeem yourself, you actually have to own up to your actions. And that's what Charlie does in this episode when he owns up to what he did to Sun, admits it to her. Mm-hmm. It's a small moment, but it's an incredibly important one.
Yeah. Another aspect of Expose is just that there's a lot of returning dead characters.
Yeah.
Between Arst, Shannon, and Boone.
You know what? It's funny. I don't think it's like an accident or a coincidence that they lump Nikki and Paolo in with Arst, because it seems like it seems like they wanted to, because Arst was a character in the background. I think they wanted to kind of emphasize that Nikki and Paolo also existed in the background.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was cool seeing all those characters again and stuff. So it was kind of like a cool episode in that sense. And it was them basically dealing with a lot of fan backlash over the characters themselves. Cause I like the episode, but the characters themselves are horrible.
Yeah.
They should have never happened.
Yeah. They're terrible. The initial idea of their reveal, like, I'm glad, like, the initial idea for, like, their introduction didn't happen. That was just, I thought that, like, I forgot, like, somebody like Hurley or somebody, like, was supposed to stumble upon them having sex in Sawyer's tent. And it's like, what? That's horrible. Don't, what a terrible idea that would have been.
Yeah. That's just, yeah, they're really bad characters. They really didn't have a reason to be in there. They felt forced in there and it didn't feel natural. But the episode itself, like I said, I kind of actually liked it.
Because their introduction is so freaking hilarious too. Because Locke is coming back out of the jungle after like having, basically rescued Echo, from the polar bear. Echo is dying, and all of a sudden, one of the first people to run up to Locke is fucking Nikki, asking about, like, oh, get Jack. And I'm just like, who the fuck are you all of a sudden?
There's even, like, they even used Nikki to explain to fans that were tuning into Lost for the first time details about other characters that are
yes,
like Nikki could be heard in the background in one scene going when they were bringing, I think it was when they were bringing Echo back in, it said Echo, remember his brother was dead in the forest or whatever.
Yeah.
And it was what the fuck? Why are you recapping this? We're not idiots, you know?
Yeah, no, it was hilarious. It was when they were going to the Pearl Station, which was located underneath the plane that Boone died in, and also Echo's dead brother was in. And they were going there with Echo. And I think Paulo just asked what's so important about this, and Nikki just says out of the blue, that's the plane where Echo's dead brother is.
Yeah.
And I'm like, how do you even know that?
Well, the thing that was frustrating about that is one of the best things that Lost did when it started was it respected the audience's intelligence. It didn't do that kind of stuff. It didn't do those really cheap reminders that just felt forced and bad that a lot of shows did before. Yeah, and it was one of the first shows that didn't do that. They kind of said, okay, the audience knows what's going on. We're going to respect that, and we're not going to re-force everything down your throat so you understand it. And it was breaking from TV tradition to do that. And then in season 3, when they brought in Nikki and Paolo, they started doing that shit with Nikki and Paolo. And it's dude, you went 2 seasons without doing this shit. Why are you doing it now? You know?
They've low-key done it in other scenes with other characters too.
They did it artfully.
Yeah, artfully, where characters would mention stuff to other characters that previously you wouldn't have guessed that character would know about that information, but it was just with the Nikki example is the most egregious example of that, because it comes out of nowhere, and that is one character who should not be aware of Echo's personal situation. You know?
Yeah, it's just really stupid. It's annoying. It gets in the way. It hurts the overall plot of the story.
And also that comes literally right after that character has just been introduced out of the blue too.
So it all ties together, and it's really bad. So they're kind of probably the worst aspect of season 3.
Yeah.
And the other aspect, I think that the other thing that kind of bothered me was some of the stuff with the others. It just got kind of dumb. We talked about Jack spiking the football. That scene was really dumb. I think they were trying to find reasons to they were playing way too much on the will they won't they stuff with the threesome between Jack and Sawyer and Kate and stuff.
Yeah, they were leaning way too hard into the Jack, Kate, and Sawyer love triangle. Which
into shit about making it very tropey, which it wasn't really that tropey before, you know?
Right.
There was a love triangle, but they weren't overdoing it. They weren't over troping it, you know? And then, and then in really season 3, they way over troped it, you know?
They had Jack walk into Ben's surveillance room to see Kate and Sawyer having sex.
Yeah, and that just felt like something you'd see in a much lesser show.
Right. Yeah, and then we get to see Kate's pained expression as she realizes Jack's starting a relationship with Juliet.
Yeah.
And all that. It's come on.
they played too much into that stuff, which was bad. You know, that's very tropey and it's very bad. So that kind of stuff I didn't like. I think a lot of kind of stuff with the others, getting to know some of the others and stuff wasn't that great. Outside of Julia and Ben.
Well, you know what? Yeah, you know what? The biggest thing is, so this season formally introduced us to the others. We finally got that curtain pulled back. The problem is, what's behind the curtain actually wasn't all that interesting.
Yeah. Well, Juliet was interesting. Ben's interesting.
Oh, yeah.
The others we already knew were somewhat interesting, like Tom and stuff like that, you know.
Well, Juliet and Ben are interesting, but they're interesting because they are complex characters.
Yeah.
You know, they're interesting for their own reasons. Juliet, by the way, is a brand new addition to the season, and she's the one new addition that works. She was not a Nikki and Paolo situation.
There are other new additions in the season that are good. They haven't really come into their own yet in this season, Richard.
Richard was introduced this season. That's right.
And Richard's a fascinating character.
Yeah,
and I think they did him right in season 3 because, like we talked about, a lot of the others just weren't that interesting and stuff, and they over-explained them, and that kind of made it dull. So that ended up up happening with a lot of the others who were introduced to now in season 3. But we were also introduced in season 3 to Richard, and everything about him was kept very vague and and that made him interesting.
And I suppose also, like, technically, Jacob was introduced this season.
Kind of, yeah.
Like I said, technically.
Yeah. Jacob was introduced this season in that way. Who else that was actually interesting? I guess, Alex.
Alex was introduced.
We knew about Alex?
No, she was introduced in season 2.
We didn't see her in season 2.
We saw her in season 2. We saw her in Claire's memories.
That's right.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. We did see her in season 2.
I noticed, yeah, one of the things Lost does is they like to introduce new characters each season.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, we got introduced to our main cast in season 1. Season 2 introduced Ben, introduced
Desmond.
Desmond was Ben and Desmond were like the major additions for season 2. And, also the tail section survivors.
Yeah, Echo, Anna Lucia, Libby.
Yeah.
Bernard,
even though like only Bernard and Echo make it to season 3, and Bernard's the only one who makes it to season, the rest of the show.
Echo died like fairly early in season 3 too.
Yeah, he did. Like, I was kind of surprised. I thought that sucked. I really liked Echo. Echo was like one of my favorite new characters to come out of season 2, outside of like obviously Ben and Desmond.
Apparently he wanted out of his contract and he was kind of an asshole on the set too.
Oh, really? That's what you heard. So that's why they killed him off so early.
Yeah, he wanted out and he was being an asshole about it, and so they let him out. I know, Anna Lucia and Livy, I think both got DUIs. I think I mentioned that on the last Lost podcast we did.
You mentioned that in the last podcast. But
yeah, some of the other people have too. Got DUIs as well, like that. People that stayed through the whole thing and stuff. But
Jesus Christ, they were partying down there, weren't they?
Yeah, but a lot of the tail section people just were not getting along well with on the show. So yeah, tail section survivors did not last too long. It's all we got left is Bernard now.
But but this season, like, they introduced Juliet. I think Juliet's one of my favorite new additions to the show to come out of season 3.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously Jacob, but Jacob's a ghost at this point.
Yeah, and Richard's great too.
Richard's great. Yeah, Richard's awesome.
Richard's like Desmond was last season. Yeah, like he's great, but he hasn't become great yet. Like he's going to become great in the next couple seasons.
Although they do in one episode of the season, one of the best episodes of the season, which is a Ben-centric episode.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because we finally get a Ben-centric episode, and it's great. And we find out one interesting thing about Richard that really makes you go, what? Because we see flashbacks to Ben when he's a young boy on the island with his dad, who, by the way, we find out Roger Workman is Ben's dad, or was Ben's dad, which was another funny connection that, you wouldn't have thought of.
Oh, that's another season 3 character we forgot to mention. Roger Workman.
Yeah, Roger Workman. Yeah, they introduced him earlier as a skeleton when Hurley finds the van.
It wasn't Charlie's redemption, but it was the first episode that made Charlie, like, rootable again.
Yeah.
That was the one where you go like, okay, I don't hate Charlie anymore. Even though he hadn't redeemed himself yet, at least he was like, they had a fun adventure with him and Hurley, and it made you start to care about him again.
It seems like they deliberately put a lot of focus in season 3 into rehabilitating Charlie. Like, one of the writers or somebody realized that they were just like, Charlie was just being an awful character this whole time, and they needed to, like, rehabilitate him. Because, this is a season where Charlie becomes more likable and somebody to root for. Yes. Rather than like the asshole that he was for like 2 seasons.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. They made Charlie like worthwhile again. And they really did such a good job of that. And that plays into, the finale and his ultimate fate. But we'll not get there yet because we're talking about Ben's episode.
Yeah. We're talking about Ben's episode where we find out, surprise, Ben's been lying. What? Ben Linus lie? Because his whole thing since the beginning of the season is he's been literally telling everybody that unlike all the others around him, he was born on the island. That was his thing. That was his claim. I was born here, unlike everybody around me. And then we find out in his flashback episode that no, he was not born on the island. They do kind of a fake out because they show his mom giving birth.
You got a lot in this show, and in season 3 in particular, I think they really started doing that actively, where they would set up a scene so that you thought it was something else. So they set up the beginning of this episode. It seems like there's this husband and wife, and the wife's gone into labor, and they're on the island.
Yeah, well, yeah.
And then you find out they're not on the island.
No, they're in the middle of the woods in Portland, Oregon, which is funny because in the first episode where we meet Juliet, where we get Juliet's flashbacks, we see Juliet being recruited by Richard, who's telling Juliet that they have a facility in Portland.
Yes. Because Juliet's character is in Florida, I believe. She's in Miami, I think.
Yeah.
She's talking about going to Oregon for this thing.
Going to Portland. And then, which we find out is, just to cover, what Richard's really talking about is the island. Mm-hmm. Not actually Portland, but it's amusing that when you get to Ben's episode that you find out that Ben was actually born in Portland.
Mm-hmm. Which is, it's the lie of all lies. It's the center stone of his lie that's perpetrated through there. This is the episode where you really go from not just Ben being a manipulator, but Ben being a liar.
Yes.
This is kind of the episode that establishes that. It really goes into the whole, I lied, I'm lying, or something. And then from that point on, you're constantly having scenes where somebody said, why didn't you say this, Ben, or something, and he's just like, I lie.
Yeah, he just says, I lie, I'm a liar, Yeah, that becomes Ben's thing, Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing I want to talk about from that episode in particular is his theme song, which is probably one of the best pieces of music in the entire series.
Right.
And what makes it so good is that with slight variations on how it's played, it can have entirely different connotations.
Right.
So that song, when you first hear it, is really menacing, I think. I think the first time you hear it, it's really menacing. It's confusing because it's all in that episode. Then you hear it another time, and it's very, melodramatic. It's very melancholy. It's sad. It's this is a really sad song. Then you hear it again and it sounds kind of hopeful. Then you hear it again and it's menacing again. It's just it encapsulates all these different moods, and it's just in slight variations on how it's played. And this is a strength of the music in the series, which I think I talked a little bit about when we talked about season 1, but this was, I believe, the first TV series to be live orchestrated. So every episode, they would film the entire episode, and then the episode would be screened in front of an orchestra, and they would play all of the music from the beginning of the episode to the end of the episode live, and record that music for it. So most shows, they would just take let's take this song we already have and fit it in here while we're editing it. It's no, the entire run of the episode was live orchestrated. Music was just played through, and then the entire thing was placed over the entire episode.
Right.
And that's that hadn't been done before in television. It's how films are done, but it hadn't been done before in television, So it was a big deal when Lost did that. And one of the things that they're able to do with that, because they're orchestrating every episode, the composer for the series, which is Michael Giuliano, I can't remember what his last name is. He also did a lot of the Pixar movies and stuff. He would take a theme and adjust it and play around with it. And so you get that a lot in Lost. Every time you hear a character's theme or a song in that show, it's different than a different time you've heard it. It's never the same because it's always live orchestrated. So it's always a unique performance of that song. And sometimes there's variations in it. And Ben's theme in this episode is the perfect example of that. Because in that one episode, you hear it in 4 or 5 different incarnations. So
that's really cool. But the big thing about the Ben's episode is not only do we find out Ben's origin on the island and how he comes to be and how he rises up to become basically the leader of the others, but we also we also see the first time Ben meets Richard, and that's when Ben's a young boy, and Richard looks exactly the same as he does in the present day.
Well, besides having, scruffy beard and hair.
Yeah. But the point is, he does.
Yeah. Age-wise, he looks exactly the same.
He looks exactly the same age, which is the first thing that makes you go, what's going on here? It's never brought up or elaborated upon in this season, but that's just thrown out there for you to digest and ponder upon for the rest of the season, because every time you see Richard after that, you're like, well, shit, there's something going on with this guy.
Yeah. We're also cued in that none of the others that we've met on the show, at least to this point, I don't think, like any of them, they were all recruited.
Yeah.
Except, Ben, who was the last surviving member of Dharma, basically. And then everybody else was recruited afterwards.
And we know that Richard is the one doing the recruiting, because we saw him out there
on Ben's behalf, yeah.
On Ben's behalf.
But that's all after Dharma, though.
But it could be argued that not even on Ben's behalf, because it could be argued Richard recruited Ben.
It could be, yeah. I mean, and that plays into a part, like, Richard's role on the island plays in more deeply as you go in,
Yeah.
Like, they talk about Ben being the only one who speaks to Jacob, and there's something that plays into that later coming up, too.
Right.
But yeah, the main thing is that Richard's been there longer than anybody, basically, that we've met.
Yeah.
He's been on the island longer than anybody we've met so far, including all the Dharma people.
In the flashback, in Ben's flashbacks, we see some of the Dharma Initiative. Obviously, Ben's father joins the Dharma Initiative, and Ben comes to the island via his father joining the Dharma Initiative. And so we get to actually see some of the Dharma Initiative, and we get to see that they are actively fighting people on the island called the Hostiles. Mm-hmm. And we see Richard and others basically wearing rags. Richard has long hair, and Richard says that, they're the native inhabitants of the island. Yeah. So Richard is one of the natives. Ben is not a native. Nobody else in the others' camp are natives. Just Richard.
Yeah. So it's like, that's the other thing, is that we know that Richard was from the others, and we see some of the others at the end of his episode when they exterminate everybody in the Dharma village.
Yes.
And they kill everybody. I mean, like, Ben kills his own dad, and then the others invade the camp and kill everybody there.
So I guess
everyone in Dharma now, except for the only ones that aren't, are apparently Ben and, was it the two guys that ended up in the Swan Station?
Yeah, the two guys ended up in the Swan Station. The episode, though, does beg the question, because there obviously were more natives than just Richard back then. But
yeah, that's what I was going to say, yeah.
If everybody around Ben included, were recruited from elsewhere into basically the others, what happened to all the natives besides Richard?
That's, I think, if I remember correctly, that was never really answered. There's other aspects to that too. It's like, where did those others come from?
Right.
Besides Richard, because apparently nobody can give birth on the island.
Yeah, apparently. Are they immortal like Richard seems to be too? Were they? I mean, were they immortal?
There's not details about that.
Yeah.
Not yet. And a lot of that I think is vague even by the end of the series. But
yeah, I think
there yet.
Purposely vague. That's some deep lore that the series never really explores.
Yeah.
It just like tantalizes you with it.
When we were talking about this season before we started it, when we were still on season 2, I noted that the point at which season 3 started getting good again was when Desmond started trying to save Charlie. And
yes.
when that became obvious, when he told Charlie that that's what
when we find out that Desmond, his experience with turning the key and the hatch irrevocably changes him.
Yeah. The exposure to all that electromagnetic energy.
And like I said,
and we get that with Desmond's first episode.
Yeah, so we get literally the coolest flashback episode in the entire series. So far. which is a first like mind blow, because we get Desmond's second flashback episode.
Yeah, because he had his first one was the season 2 finale, which was also a really good episode. But
which is also a great episode. But this is the first one, and you know what? Instead of the flashback being memories, Desmond is it's a time travel episode. I'm just gonna come out and say it because
yeah, it's kind of like a weird mix of like Groundhog's Day and like because it doesn't loop like Groundhog's Day.
No,
but
there's
it's
no
like
loop.
It's like a deja vu. It's a single loop kind of.
Well, Desmond ends up in his past. He ends up inside of his flashback.
It's almost it's kind of like a lucid flashback.
Yeah,
it's like lucid dreams, but for the flashback. Because he's in the flashback, but he's controlling it somehow.
Because he turns the key, and then he ends up in his apartment with Penny,
having like fallen off a ladder when he was trying to paint the room.
Yeah,
and then he's like, at first it takes him a while to adjust to where he is, and then when he adjusts to where he is, it's as if the island stuff becomes like a vague dream that he's completely forgotten. It's not like he goes, oh, the island stuff was all a dream, but remembers it all. It's like he's basically forgotten everything from the island. But then certain things start cueing his memories back to the island. So it's weird. Like it's kind of like this weird double amnesia thing. And so he's like, something will happen and he gets that feeling of like deja vu, and he's like, starts predicting stuff that's going to happen, and it ends up happening. For the most part, he makes a few mistakes, but
he makes a few mistakes, yeah.
And it's really cool because you get like things like he meets Charlie, and he sees Charlie off the island, and he's like, I know you. We were on the island, and Charlie's like, yeah, we're in England, and England is an island,
This is where they have Charlie singing Wonderwall in the scene, and I was just like, oh, of course, way to be on the nose, like since they obviously based Charlie off of Oasis.
Yeah.
So just have him sing an Oasis song to really drive it home.
This is like Charlie before his band took off,
Yeah. He's just singing songs on the sidewalk. And Desmond's just like, I know you. I know you,
brother.
I know you, brother.
I knew you from another life, brother.
Yeah. And Charlie's just like, what the hell? Get away, get away from me, you crazy
He said there was a key, and we were pushing a button.
Yeah.
In another life, brother.
So there's a lot of crazy. There's a scene where Desmond's trying to ask like a physicist friend or something about if time travel was possible, and trying to convince him that he's time traveled, and that's one of the major scenes where he gets things wrong, and so he's unable to convince like his friend that he's time traveled.
But everything he's saying doesn't happen. Like he's like, oh, this game, this is where in this game that the team's gonna turn it around.
Well, the problem is like it does happen, but he's got the wrong night at that point.
Yeah,
it happens like a different evening.
But it's just playing on his his confusion over what's going on, because he's certain that this is happening, and this kind of disproves it for him. But then as more flashbacks happen, he's becoming certain over again.
Yes.
And when he gets really clued into what's going on is when he runs into an elderly female selling wedding rings.
Yeah.
And this is when he decides, like, I have another, whatever is going on here, I have another chance. I'm going to be a better man. I'm going to ask Penny to marry me.
This is where the episode gets really freaky.
So he goes into the store, he talks to the woman, he selects the ring he wants, and then he says, I'll buy it. And she says, no, you won't.
Yeah.
You don't buy the ring. And then she starts going on about how he's not supposed to do these things. And then he's like, what the fuck are you talking about, lady? And it starts to become clear that she has some similar experience to him.
Yeah.
Where she has like experience, having to do with like influencing time or something in the same way as him. But she's trying to teach him a lesson about not being able to change time.
I'm not sure if it's ever explained who exactly she is.
Later in the series it is.
Okay.
She's the mother of a character that we meet in season 4.
Oh, okay. I think I know who. In retrospect now. But there's also like an Easter egg too. I don't notice like in Desmond's second flashback episode for the season, which doesn't involve any time travel or anything really out of the ordinary. It's just a normal flashback episode where he goes into a monastery. But if you look at I guess like the friar or something who kind of takes Desmond in and fire him, there's like one scene where you see a photo on his desk and it's him and it's that woman, the time travel woman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's also connected to another, kind of background character as well that I won't mention just for people that haven't, that might be watching it for the first time.
Right.
But there's a lot, like some of the background characters on the show, the background characters are usually a lot deeper than you originally think. You just think like, oh, it's a character to tell this part of this person's story. And then you see him in somebody else's story later and go, wait, what's going on here?
Yeah. Yeah. Like the woman Sawyer Khan ending up in, one of Kate's flashback episodes.
Or the, you know, Clancy Brown's character who was in like Saeed's flashback and then also on the island with Desmond.
Yeah. Basically recruiting Desmond into the Dharma Initiative.
Yeah. So you have like all these, there's like characters like that. So a lot of the characters, and some of them are ones that we've met that we don't know yet are connected that later on end up becoming so. So that's another one of the great things about Lost is that you take these characters instead of just being some one-off background character or character exclusive to this person's story. No, of course. So like the world's small and everything's connected.
Yeah, everything's connected. Yeah. There's like one of the things, Lost really emphasizes is that we're all connected and there's some surprising connections that you would never make. There's actually a major revelation concerning a character who's important to both Locke and Sawyer that you wouldn't have guessed. Well, you probably could have guessed before, like the hints were there.
Yeah.
But once it's revealed, it's kind of mind blowing.
And so what you're talking about right there is that there's an episode in which Locke is he goes to the others' village when they go and rescue Jack. We won't.
Yeah, he goes with
he
goes with Kate and Saeed. He's part of a mission with Kate and Saeed to rescue Jack from the others.
We won't go into everything there, but basically
that's when we see Jack playing football. It's kind of terrible. Yeah.
But this is in this moment, this Locke kind of switches sides from the castaways to the others.
Yeah.
And how this happens is that he kind of is putting pressure on Ben to give him information. And at a certain point, Ben tells him the story about, oh, imagine there's a box on this island and whatever you want, there it is. Kind of thing. And Locke's okay, asshole.
Yeah, which the box thing is bullshit, but
later on Ben refers to it as a metaphor.
Yeah.
That's just his constant manipulations. But then he tells him at one point, like, he's like, look, come with me. I need to show you something. He's all, are you going to show me this box? And he's like, no, I'm going to show you what came out of it. And he opens up this door, and to Locke's shock and horror, it's Locke's father. He stole his kidney and everything, is on the island. He's gagged and everything there. Locke goes to kind of untie him and he bites him. He's like a feral animal. He's convinced, Locke's dad's convinced that he's in hell, that they're dead and they're in hell. And that's why he keeps like,
but Ben's thing is, Ben is like, to fully join us if I'm going to let you in on all the secrets of the island, you've got to kill your father.
Yeah.
That's what Ben tells Locke, and Locke is unable to bring himself to do that.
Yeah. What's interesting here also is that Locke, we've talked about kind of the tragedy of his character being like constantly needing to be special. He needs to be somebody who's special.
Needing validation.
He's always been unspecial, basically. He's always been the opposite of that. He's always been abandoned. He's been, kind of ignored, looked over.
He was lonely. He had a low-paying job. He doesn't have this illustrious backstory that the other characters in the show have. He's not, a world-class surgeon. He's not an outlaw.
Not a rock star.
He's not a rock star. He's not a handsome, rugged, like, con man,
He's not a lottery winner.
He's not a lottery winner. He's just kind of like,
he works at a box company.
He's just this ordinary, a bit of a sad sack,
Yeah. And he always wanted to feel special. And as you get more Locke episodes, it goes on to go like way back into like his early childhood and wanting to be special and being told he was special and then having it not work out and stuff. And so that's always been like his life. And since his discovery of his father, this has become this obsession of his. It's something that holds him back. And when he was on the island and away from his father, he was kind of thriving. And then almost always tied to his failures are things that have to do with his past and with his father.
Yes.
And what his father did to him or things like that. So everything's kind of comes back to his father is basically like his kryptonite.
Yeah.
It's held him back and everything. So as much as Ben's using this whole thing as like he won't be able to do it, so I'm just going to give him an impossible task thing. At the same time, it's probably the best possible thing that could happen to Locke to cement him and make him the confident person he wants to become is that his father has to die.
Right.
But that's another interesting thing the show does, because that's not Ben's intention at all.
Well, yeah, that's not Ben's intention. But Ben's right in his instinct. Ben is correct. Locke won't do this, and so Ben tells Locke that unless he can bring him, so Ben tells Locke that he's abandoning him and they're leaving, and Locke can only follow them if he does bring himself to kill his father, which Ben basically tells him, we know you won't, and so they leave, but unexpectedly, Richard comes around behind Ben's back and basically gives Locke a tip-off.
He gives him a file.
Yeah, he gives him a file on Sawyer. And Locke's reaction is, like, Richard is like, if Richard was like, if you can't kill him, maybe somebody else will, and he hands Locke the file. And Locke is like, Sawyer, why would Sawyer want to kill my dad?
He's like, keep reading.
Yeah. And we know Sawyer's backstory is Sawyer is a con man because
first off, we know Sawyer's name isn't Sawyer, it's James Ford.
Yeah, we know James Ford.
He took the name Sawyer because of his backstory.
Yeah, we know James Ford Sawyer is a con man because his life was turned upside down as a child by a con man that he has
named Sawyer, yeah.
named Sawyer, that he has been looking for his entire life. And this is the point where I feel like the clues were there. It should have clicked earlier because, who's the only other major con man in the show who has shown up repeatedly, and that would be Locke's dad is a con man and is the only, besides Sawyer, is the only other major con artist that keeps popping up in the show. So I think I think like more astute people would have put it together sooner. But yeah, we find out that Locke's dad is the Sawyer that led to James Ford's parents' murder-suicide.
Yes.
That James has been looking for.
So Sawyer, or Locke gets Sawyer to come back to the brig where he's locked up somebody that he says is Ben. He tells Sawyer, I have Ben, you need to go and you need to kill him. And Sawyer's like, well, I'm not going to kill him. I'm going to take him back as prisoner. And Locke's like, well, sure you are. Just kind of like, whatever you want, once you get there. And then he takes him there and he finally gets him into the brig, pushes Sawyer into the room and closes the door behind him.
Sawyer keeps asking questions and being like, I'm not going to kill him. And he's like, you will when you hear what he has to say. Yeah. And, and Locke being like, cagey, being like, yeah, you will. You will. Like having Sawyer confused,
So
but yeah.
He locks Sawyer in the brig with his father, who's got a hood over his head. Sawyer thinks it's Ben, so he strides over to pull the hood off of Ben and kind of give him a telling to for, everything they did to him and stuff. He pulls off the mask and he's like, who the hell are you? And it's Locke's dad. And through them communicating and talking about, Locke and Locke's dad talking about how much of a loser Locke is and everything. Through all of that, basically, Sawyer realizes that this guy is the real Sawyer. The guy that he took his name from, the guy that caused the death of his parents.
Yeah, because he goes through all the names. He's like, well, I'm a con artist. A con artist has many names, like he Anthony Cooper. He had another alias he goes by, and he's like Tom Sawyer, and then he's like, James is like, wait, what did you say?
Tom Sawyer, and he's like,
Huck Finn was already taken.
Yeah. But it was great because Sawyer's like, he's all, well, what do you know? My name's Sawyer too.
Yeah. It was a great scene. And that was the moment, James decides to kill Locke's dad.
Well, even before that, he hands him his letter, this letter that he's been rereading over and over again.
Oh, yeah.
And he wants Sawyer to read this letter, the real Sawyer to read this letter. And Sawyer's reading it, but he's kind of he's not feeling guilty. He's not showing any guilt or remorse or anything. Right. He just doesn't care.
It's clear that, it's been clear that this guy's a total sociopath and he's incapable of having any real feelings. So.
And finally, he just pisses Sawyer off to the point that he just kills him.
Yeah.
He keeps talking down to Sawyer, denying Sawyer even any closure. Kind of getting in the way of denying him anything. He eats the letter at one point,
Yeah, he rips it up and he eats it, he completely denies Sawyer any kind of closure. And so Sawyer finally gets frustrated with the whole thing and just kills him.
Yeah. which now gives Locke his in with the others.
Yes.
As this figure that's now almost mythical to the others. As this guy that was paralyzed, now he walked. He finally killed his father, did what was called unnecessary, and he's calling out Ben, constantly.
Yeah, it's funny how, the others, sort of revere Locke, and there was one scene where Ben tried to publicly goad Locke into killing his father. He has Locke's father tied up on this pole in front of everybody, and that was Ben trying to embarrass Locke in front of everybody.
Yeah, because Locke has taken on this role, and Ben feels challenged by that. His leadership feels challenged.
You start to notice that Ben is increasingly feeling threatened and jealous of Locke. And this comes to a head because once Locke presents his father's body to Ben, Ben says, okay, well then, I can take you to Jacob. And this is where it really gets freaky, right? This is one of the most memorable moments of the entire series when they go into the Jacob cabin, because Locke gets in there and Ben starts talking to an empty chair, in the middle of the spooky cabin. And Locke is just like, what are you doing? And he's like, I'm talking to Jacob. Can't you see him? And Locke's getting upset and pissed off. He's losing his patience with Ben. He's like, none of this is real. You're just, you're just bullshitting.
The man behind the curtain, like a Wizard of Oz reference.
Yeah. You're the man behind the curtain,
But at this point, he's actually thinking Ben might just be insane.
Yeah, he doesn't know what's going on because Ben's insisting that he's talking to this invisible person that Locke can't. And Locke is confused. He doesn't know whether Ben's insane or whether this is just more of Ben's cons. He doesn't know what to make of it. And Locke gets fed up and he decides to leave, and as he's leaving, he hears, help me, and he turns around and he asks Ben, what did you just say? And Ben's like, I didn't say anything. And now this turns wheels in Ben's head because Ben knows he didn't say anything and Locke heard something. So now Ben is kind of like, I think this really stokes the fires of jealousy in Ben, because then Ben realizes Jacob spoke to Locke, and if Jacob's speaking to Locke, then Ben lost the major thing that made him special among the others, which is he could talk to Jacob. And so I think this sets into motion in Ben's head that Locke needs to go. If he's talking to Jacob, he needs to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So on their way back to the others' camp, Ben says, I'm going to take you on a little detour. He says, I lied when I said that I was born on this island. I wasn't. I'm going to show you where I came from. And he takes them to a mass grave with all these decomposing bodies that have been there for 20 years, whatever, however long. And all these dead bodies in this mass grave. And he says, this is the Dharma Initiative. And as Locke's looking at the grave, Ben's like, I was the only one smart enough not to make a decision to join the others when I realized that the clash was inevitable. When it was inevitable that one side was going to be destroyed. I picked the right side. And that makes me considerably smarter than you, John. And John gets up and turns around and Ben shoots him.
Yeah, Ben shoots him and leaves him in the ditch.
In the mass grave.
But before Ben leaves him to die, Ben insists on knowing what Jacob said to him.
Yeah, Locke's like, help me. And he's like, no, I'm not going to help you. Tell me what he said. And he said, no, he said, help me. And Ben looks kind of shocked.
Ben looks shocked. And then Ben just gets this very snidely says, well, you better hope Jacob helps you.
He takes off, and then the last scene we see after that is... Well, no, that's not even in that episode. Never mind.
No,
we'll get back to that. I want to talk right now about Charlie.
But that was one of the best episodes of the season.
Yeah. I want to talk right now about Charlie. Specifically, we're talking about, we had mentioned before that Desmond was saving Charlie. We didn't talk about what was happening with Charlie, what that actually means. But we talked about Desmond's flashbacks and how, he can apparently, see little bits of, in his past, he was controlling these things in his flashback, but we didn't talk about what that meant on the island. So when Desmond got out of his flashbacks in that episode, we get to what's been happening on the island with Desmond since he turned that key, which is he just got basically thrown completely naked into the middle of the jungle.
Yes.
And he gets up and he's going around and he's a little bit off. And we see this even before we see his flashback episode, that he seems to be noticing or pointing out things before they happen. In particular, we have a series of events occurring in which he ends up getting involved with Claire and Charlie and helping them, like saving Claire when she was drowning in the ocean. And there was no possible way he would have known, but he just starts running out of the forest into the beach, goes and he saves her. And they're like, what the fuck? What's going on there? And finally, Charlie and Hurley get him drunk.
Well, Charlie gets suspicious, right, of why he's suddenly so interested. Charlie is being season 2 Charlie and is basically just being overprotective of Claire and feeling threatened that Desmond suddenly seems interested in Claire, is the way Charlie sees it. And Hurley is convinced that Desmond is seeing the future. Charlie's not buying it, but they conspire mostly because Charlie wants to get back at Desmond for, hanging around Claire. I don't know. Charlie is still horrible season 2 Charlie at this point. So.
And another great everything's connected moment, the way they convince Desmond to drink with them is because they happen to have a bottle of this scotch. And Desmond sees it and starts laughing. And he's like, oh, for that? Yeah, I'll join you. Yeah. And let's just drink straight from the bottle. Let's not use cups, which I tweeted out when I was saying, I'm like, no social distancing there. But, but what's funny about that is that we had seen in a flashback, or we see in a flashback.
We see in a future, like in a future episode in a flashback, we see that is a brand of scotch that Penny's father, industrialist Charles Widmore, who we know had conspired to keep Desmond and his daughter apart already. No, this was in the episode. This was in the time travel episode. Yeah, this was in the time travel episode because Desmond gets dressed up and goes to a job interview with Charles Widmore. And basically, instead of interviewing for the job,
asking for Penny's hand in marriage.
Right. Widmore offers him the job, but then he says, I'm not here for a job. I'm here for your daughter. And that's when Widmore picks up the scotch and basically says, the man who invented the scotch is a great man. You're not a great man. You're not, like a sip of this is worth more than what your entire monthly salary would be under me.
Yearly, I think he said.
Oh, yeah, he said yearly. Like, your entire yearly salary would be under me. You, Desmond, are not a great man. You are not even worth this scotch. Or something to that effect.
He's like, and you'll never be a great man.
Yeah, he says something to the effect of, I wouldn't share this scotch with you. What makes you think I would give you my daughter?
Yeah. And so this is them having this scotch is like to Desmond is the ultimate fuck you to Charles Widmore. Like, I'm gonna just straight up drink this scotch from the bottle like a savage.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's what convinces him to drink with them. And then through that, at the end of the episode, after all the flashbacks that reveal what's going on with Desmond and him getting these flashes and stuff, we find out he finally tells Charlie that he's outside of his flashbacks, when he's now in the present, he's still getting visions of the future now. He's still getting moments that feel like deja vu that haven't happened yet, like he was in the flashbacks. But it's in the present. And when he gets these flashbacks, he tries to change them. But like in his flashbacks, the lesson from the flashbacks that the old lady was trying to give him is that even if he changes something, history course corrects. It's kind of like death in what was those movies called?
It's Final Destination.
Yeah, it's Final Destination rules. Like the way you saw a vision of the future, you saved everybody from dying, and now death is going to find another way to kill him. It's kind of like that. Except instead of the personification of death, it's just the flow of time. So it kind of makes it a little bit like 11/22/63,
Yeah, it's sort of like that. It's the deterministic view of things. So it's basically Damon Lindelof taking a deterministic view of the universe where stuff's going to happen no matter what, instead of like a view where the future isn't determined. According to Lindelof, the future is determined.
So in this, Desmond reveals to Charlie that he wasn't saving Claire, he was saving Charlie. Like, Charlie was going to run out into the ocean to try to save Claire and was going to drown. Charlie was going to get electrocuted by a lightning bolt that hit their tent. Like, all these things that happen, they're happening to Charlie. Was trying to save Charlie.
Charlie was going to break his neck against rocks trying to get a seagull for Claire.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was part of like a rescue attempt idea Claire had that we won't get into because we just don't have time.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's like from that point on, Charlie is in this weird state where he's now knows that his death is inevitable, but he's also sticking close to Desmond, trying to put it off as long as he can. So Desmond can save him until the point in which he can't save him anymore. And so there's like a big thing about that. This ends up leading to a point in which Desmond has a vision in which he believes, and his visions are not like, he can't really make out everything, but in the vision he believes that Penny ends up on the island with him that she parachutes down, and he gets these series of flashes, and instead of like trying to stop the future from happening now, he's trying to orchestrate it. He's trying to make sure he gets all the elements he needs. He needs to go to Hurley. He needs to get Jen.
Well, Charlie ends up dying in this vision pretty gruesomely.
Yes. He triggers one of Russo's traps.
And he takes an arrow straight to his neck.
Yeah.
Straight through his Adam's apple. You know? Like.
So Desmond's trying to like make this future happen now. And he's clearly struggling with it. And he's not telling anybody what happens with Charlie with this. He's saying somebody's going to land on the island. We need, to get us all there. So they go in the guise of, they trick Jin into joining him by saying they're going camping. They're going to do some bonding. And Jin's like, oh, okay, yeah, that sounds fun. And he goes along with it. And the rest of them kind of know that he's going to find this woman that's this person that's coming to the island. He doesn't reveal who it is yet. He doesn't reveal that it's Penny yet and stuff. But that somebody's coming to the island that's important, and he needs to make everything happen the way it's supposed to so that the picture stays the same. The picture of Penny being on the island with him stays the same. Right. What ends up happening is that at the last second possible, he ends up saving Charlie again. He can't go through with it.
Yeah, he can't go through with letting Charlie die. And Charlie dying wasn't important to what was happening anyway, so.
Well, that's questionable. That gets into like a kind of philosophical question that the show I think was trying to pose, which was, by making that action, did it have an effect on that? And it shouldn't have, because it's kind of like a Schrodinger's cat kind of thing of like, if a cat's in a bag or in a box and with poison food, is the cat alive or dead? And because you don't know until you lift up the box, it's simultaneously alive and dead.
This person's parachuting onto the island. I mean,
yeah, I know.
They're coming whether Charlie's alive or not. I don't know.
But it's like, it's until that moment happens, it's a Schrodinger's cat.
Right.
It's the idea is like, until you open up the box and see, you don't know. And he's now terrified that because he did something to help Charlie, that like everything could have turned out in a different way. And even though logically it says, oh, that person is already descended on a parachute there, so it's obviously it's not going to change based on his decision. You get into the whole idea of like, was he fated to make that choice? And because he did make that choice, it was predestined to happen in that way. And so that's why that person parachuted in. So you get into like really kind of deep philosophical shit, like Schrodinger's cat based type stuff, like is what I'm saying. But essentially, he starts freaking out because he saved Charlie, and now he's like, no, it's not going to happen right. Everything's screwed up, They end up going and they find somebody stuck in a tree who's injured with a part of the tree stuck in them. And they pull the person down, and Desmond takes the helmet off of her.
Desmond is like, certain this is Penny.
Yeah. He takes the helmet off, and it's this completely different person.
Yeah, it's somebody nobody's seen before. Like,
But she has a picture that they had found before that with her stuff that had fallen from her when she had crashed into the tree, that was a picture of Desmond and Penny.
And Mikhail, surprise, shows up out of nowhere after supposedly having been killed by Locke. It turns out Mikhail isn't dead. And basically, he agrees to help patch this woman up if they agree to just let him go and pretend that they didn't see him.
Yeah. Which they do end up doing. I don't want to go in, like I said, if we're already over an hour and 10 minutes into our recording.
Yeah, we gotta wrap this, we gotta get this wrapped up. But what I want to say is, like, once she's patched up, she basically says she's there for Desmond, And so Desmond immediately believes that Penny must have sent her. Mm-hmm. And so now Desmond is more hopeful again. He's like, oh, Penny's looking for me, obviously.
And she says they have a boat.
Yes.
And she has a satellite phone, and then there's a boat that's off the island, and her people are on the boat and are there to rescue them. She also says that, everybody on 815 died, They were found on the bottom of the ocean.
They found the plane on the bottom of the ocean, and they found all the bodies, apparently.
Yeah.
Which I love it because, like, after she says that, it cuts to, like, a close-up of Hurley, and he just says, what?
Hurley's great. Hurley is really the greatest character.
He is. Yeah, he is. Yeah.
But, yeah, so kind of to wrap these things up quickly, all these different plot points we've been talking about. Mikkel goes back to Ben, tells Ben what's going on with the others reaching the island. Ben's like, now needs to stop this, so he pushes forward their timetable that they
I guess we should mention at this point that Ben has been plotting this plan where they were going to kidnap the women, the female survivors.
Mainly looking for pregnant women or women that could become pregnant, and they know Sun is pregnant.
Yeah, there was this whole thing about Juliet being Ben's plant. We find out that Juliet...
She's playing both sides.
She's playing both sides. She eventually ends up defecting from Ben and the others, and basically... So, yeah, they moved that up. So it leads to a showdown between Jack's group and Ben and the others. At the same time, they come back to the camp with Naomi and they reveal to Jack that, there's this boat and the possibility of getting rescued. They say, they gotta go to Rousseau's, the tower that's transmitting Rousseau's message, to call the boat on the, satellite phone.
They have to turn off her message because it's getting in the way. Julia informs them that there's also a underwater base.
Yeah,
they need to
the
go
Hydra.
to, and that's blocking transmissions, and they need to shut that off too.
Yeah, they need to shut that off too. That's where Charlie comes in because when that happens, Desmond reveals to Charlie he's had another vision of the future. And in this vision, Claire and her baby get on a helicopter and leave the island.
But Charlie has to drown.
Charlie has to drown in the station, and after explaining it to him, Charlie comes to a conclusion that if it means that Claire and her baby escape the island safely, that he will give his life for that because that's what he values. That's what he cares about. He will give his life for Claire, So we find that Charlie finally accepts his ultimate fate and decides to just embrace it.
Yeah. So basically our main castaways are split into 3 groups now. All these things have to happen at the same time.
Yeah.
They know that their main camp is going to be invaded by the others. And so they've rigged up these tents with dynamite and they're going to kill them all, but they don't have enough time because Ben's moved the timetable forward. And they learn this from, Alex's boyfriend who comes to them. And so now they have to have some of their group stay behind to shoot the dynamite when the others arrive to kill them.
So they nominate Jin, Bernard, and Saeed to stay behind and shoot the dynamite, while Jack leads the rest of the survivors to Rousseau's broadcast tower.
Except Desmond and Charlie, who are going out to the Hydra.
Yeah.
And so, so you have these different kind of paths happening. While Jack's leading his group there, Ben goes to cut off Jack, but it's just him and Alex, his daughter, going.
This leads to one of my favorite moments of the episode where, it's just Ben and Alex. Ben says in an earlier scene that he's going to talk Jack out of it, and this is one of my favorite scenes in the entire season because this is the scene where Jack stands up to Ben and he refuses to be manipulated by Ben or to fall for his shit. He falls for it, but he refuses to be manipulated.
Mm-hmm. Ben convinces Jack that he's basically killed the 3 people on the beach they had there, and Jack beats the shit out of Ben.
Because Ben's whole thing was he tried to get Jack to back down by threatening the lives of Saeed, Jin, and Bernard, and Jack just basically sits there and lets him kill them and then beats the shit out of Ben. And then Jack takes Ben hostage and continues to do it. So Ben fails to manipulate Jack and to get Jack to change course. And it's such a great scene.
Yeah. Meanwhile, you'd mentioned that, the 3 people that were left behind to shoot the dynamite were held hostage. They really were held hostage. They weren't killed, but they were held hostage. They fired 3 shots into the sand, basically to like make Jack think that they'd killed him.
As typical with Ben, everything Ben says or does is a lie or a bluff or a con.
A manipulation, yeah.
A manipulation.
So, so basically the way this goes down is that the operation on the island, or at the camp is somewhat successful. They kill a bunch of them, but they don't kill all of them. And then they end up getting captured.
Right.
As they're worried because as the other group is hiking to the radio station to cut off Russo's signal, they see the explosions happen, but they only see 2, not 3. And so everybody from the camp is really worried because of that. Sawyer ends up deciding that he's going to go back to help them. Juliet says that she's going to join them, that she knows the secret cache of weapons, which she later reveals to James isn't the case, but that was how she could get away from Jack to do it. To go help. Because she feels like indebted to them, because she was one of the others and now she's joining them.
Poor Hurley. Hurley volunteers for a bunch of stuff in this episode and everybody turns him away.
Yeah.
Right?
They're all turning him away to protect him. Yeah, but they're all being mean in order to get him to go away.
Yeah, they're basically everybody like basically just says, "Look how fat you are. You're just gonna get in the way,"
Yeah, it's like the Magician's musical episode. You got to be cruel to be kind.
Yeah, exactly. And this comes to a head when Hurley volunteers to go with Juliet and Sawyer basically tells him he's too fat, he'll get in the way again. So when we see Juliet and Sawyer get back to the beach and they're trying to decide what to do about the others that are patrolling, basically hanging around, we see Hurley come out of the jungle in the van that he found earlier in the season.
Runs over one of the others.
Hits another one. It's an amazing scene. I was like, yeah, Hurley. Woo!
And then, James, Sawyer, and Juliet take care of the rest.
Sawyer kills Tom.
Killing Tom in cold blood when he didn't need to.
Just
saying this is for taking the kid off the raft.
Yeah, this is for
which I think we'd all kind of forgotten at a certain point. Tom became a sympathetic other. It's like, oh yeah, he did take Walt off the raft from his father,
He did. Tom was basically paraded around for the second season as like the leader of the others for a time, as
and then season 3 is more like a sympathetic other who just works for Ben.
Right.
And then Sawyer here is reminding us that he might be the sympathetic other, but he also took Walt off that raft.
Right. He might be sympathetic, but he was complicit in all of Ben's plans.
Yeah.
So.
And by taking Walt off the raft caused like a chain event of tragedies.
Yes.
So, yeah, that fucked everybody up. So, so Sawyer kills him just like flat out, in cold blood. And then, so that's kind of that storyline. They get back in touch with Jack and the group because Hurley's reaching out to talk to the others to tell them to leave them alone and they've killed their whole group and stay away. And so he's being all tough. He's like, attention others and stuff on the radio. And then Jack's like, Hurley? Hurley's like, Jack? Why do you have a radio? And they're talking and it reveals that everybody's safe. Everybody is like exuberant and excited. And that takes us back to Charlie's mission.
Yeah. So Charlie is in the Hydra. It's not as simple as he thought it was going to be because it's being guarded by
he gets there, he thought it was flooded. He thought the station was going to be flooded and then he just went in and turned off a switch there. And he gets in and he's like, oh, it's not flooded. I'm alive. And he's like, he gets out of the water and he's like screaming like, woo, and then like 2 people come in with guns. Yes. And he's like, oh, fuck. And now he's tied up. Meanwhile, he had knocked out Desmond because Desmond was going to try to take his place. And Charlie knocked him out to stop that. So Desmond, as these people are like interrogating Charlie, Desmond wakes up and Mikkel is on the beach shooting at him because Ben had sent Mikkel down there.
Yeah.
Because these people had radioed Ben at the station telling him that they had Charlie. And so he sent Mikkel to kill Charlie, but also the other people at the station.
Yeah. He sent Mikkel to kill the other people at the station right away, which Ben had told nobody that he had guards in that station or that station was even active.
Yeah, because he didn't want people to know that he was blocking their transmissions.
Yeah.
Off the island, He was like trying to keep that a secret. And now Desmond pops up inside the station, and talks to Charlie and stuff. And then the 2 guards are coming back. So Desmond has to hide.
Then Mikhail shows up.
And he's like, where's the other one?
Yeah, where's the other And they're like, what? And then Mikhail kills the two guards. And then I guess he's gonna kill Charlie as well, but then Desmond pops out and Desmond shoots a spear into Mikhail. And then he frees Charlie, and then they get from the second guard, the blonde-haired guard. She's
dying. She's
dying.
Yet.
She's still conscious, and so Charlie tries to get the code for the switch from her before she dies, and she basically tells him that it's good vibrations. It's
from the Beach Boys, yeah.
A musician came up with the code.
It was a musician who coded the system.
Yeah,
and so he had done that. So this is like why it needed to be Charlie.
And why, yeah, because Charlie's a musician, so Charlie doesn't have to remember a series of numbers. He just has to remember
figure out the song, yeah, on
the beats of the song, yeah, which he does,
and he's like, it's still looking like they're going to be safe. Like, they find some diving equipment, which means they'll be able to get out of there safely. Everything seems to be great.
Well,
but
when
then
Charlie puts in
the code, a phone starts ringing in there.
Yeah, phone starts ringing, and he answers, and it's Penny on the other end. And Charlie's like, oh yeah, Desmond's here. So yeah, your boat's out there. You're going to rescue us. And Penny's like, what boat? And he's like, what do you mean? That's not your boat. And he's like, but no, Naomi. Naomi said you had your boat. Who's Naomi?
And so that's Desmond's on his way over because Charlie had called for him to come over. And as Desmond's coming up, as Charlie's figuring out that everything that's going on with the ship is a lie,
he sees Mikhail outside of the station, outside the window of the station in full diving equipment, holding a grenade.
Yeah.
And smiling, like fuck you,
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
So he pulls the pin and Charlie runs and closes and latches the door just as Desmond's about to arrive to try to save Desmond. It blows out the window and starts filling up that pod with water very quickly.
By the way, Mikhail is a hardy. Jesus Christ. That guy's impossible to kill. Yeah. That dude's impossible to kill, apparently.
So he blew himself up and blew up that window, and now Charlie's in that room that's flooding, and he writes on his hand, and probably one of the most iconic scenes in television history, not just the series, "Not Penny's boat" on his palm, and puts it against the glass for Desmond to see.
Yeah, and that's when Desmond figures out, and that's when they figure out that this whole situation with the boat and Naomi has nothing to do with Penny.
Yeah, and so that's it. Charlie dies.
And then we go back to
Jack's group.
Yeah, Jack's group at the radio tower. Charlie had turned off the signal jamming, so the phone goes live. Naomi is about to call her ship when she gets a knife in her back. And
we should backtrack just a second here, because last we saw Locke, he was in a pit full of the dead Dharma people, a mass grave. He'd been shot by Ben and knocked into this pit. We see a scene after that in which Locke is like in the pit, and he manages to get a gun from one of the corpses, and he's putting it to his head, and he's crying, and he's about to kill himself because he's just basically dying in this pit anyways. And then all of a sudden he hears his name called, and he looks up, and it's Walt.
Yeah, it's Walt, and Walt says he needs to get up because he has work to do.
Yeah,
and we know that it's really Jacob.
Yeah, or somebody else, that we haven't yet met or talked about. But so Naomi got a knife to the back. She's falling over, seemingly dead. Jack's like, what the fuck? Looks up, there's Locke. He had threw the knife.
But by the way, I should mention earlier Ben told Jack that Naomi was the bad guy.
Yeah.
Because Ben told Jack Naomi was the bad guy, and Jack kind of laughs at Ben and says, oh, that's right, because you're the good guys.
Yeah.
I remember. Yeah,
So now, Naomi's dead, their radio finally connects, and somebody on the other end is calling, saying, hello? Naomi, hello? And, Jack goes to pick it up, and Locke kind of aims at the phone and tries to shoot, misses it. Jack grabs it. Locke's threatening to kill him. saying, put the phone down, I'll kill you, but he can't do it. And Jack calls his bluff.
Yeah, and Locke just leaves.
Yeah, so Jack radios for help and says, we're survivors, or can you save us? And they said, well, hell yeah, we can save you.
Yeah.
And Locke leaves, and that's kind of it.
That's kind of where we leave off, yeah, because it sets up a new conflict for the fourth season, which like I said, things get way more interesting from here. Like I said, this is a season where I feel Lost finds its footing, and
season 4 is probably the best episode of our best season of Lost.
Yeah.
Ironically, it was the writer's strike season, and it was probably the best season.
It was probably the best season, yeah, because this is where they set up events to where, yeah, it gets really amazing. I really enjoyed season 3 a lot. My final thoughts on season 3 was, this was a good season. Even a great season. Season 4 is even better.
I'd say season 3 is a great half of a season. And a good season overall.
Good season overall.
But half of the season is great.
Definitely a huge improvement over season 2. For sure. And the best is yet to come.
It has lower lows than season 2, but higher highs and a general better consistency.
Yeah, absolutely.
But man, those lows. Nikki and Pao lows.
Yeah.
Those Nikki and Pao lows are pretty low.
Very few episodes of a survivor just randomly going crazy for an episode.
Yeah. They've gotten away from that at least, but yeah. But it's definitely a step up from the general flow of season 2, and the finale is perhaps one of the best episodes of the entire series. And I think probably the best season finale of the entire series.
Oh yeah, I think so.
One of the most iconic moments with Charlie's death being
you're never
super
going
iconic,
you
sad,
are never
very emotional.
You are never going to forget not paying his boat. Never going to forget that.
I mean, it's a meme at this point,
Yeah.
It is. It's television history. It's like ingrained in pop culture history. When people talk about in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, people talk about the greatest singular moments in television history. Not Penny's boat is going to be one of them.
Absolutely.
So yeah, it's just absolute great television. And yeah, so the end of a great season. Can't wait to discuss season 4, the shortest season, the writer's strike season, and also, I think, the best season of the show. And we're going to be doing that in 2 weeks, I believe.
In 2 weeks. I'm 2 episodes into it, and already it's amazing. So yeah.
So we'll be talking about Lost season 4 in 2 weeks. Next week, we're going to be doing Advocates of Great Television because it's our 250th episode. I don't have the shows that we're watching yet, but I'll have those edited in at the very beginning of this podcast you're listening to. So if you're listening to this podcast, you've already heard. But we just haven't finalized them as we're recording it right now. But yeah, that's it for this week. All that we have left to do is talk about what's coming up in the week ahead. We're recording this Monday, April 6th, today on Netflix. The Big Show came to Netflix. This is, I should say it, The Big Show. It's about it's like a family show about the wrestler, The Big Show.
It should have been named The Big Show.
the Big Show.
Yeah.
It's just everything twice. Or The Big Show, Big The.
Yeah.
Just going forward and backward. But yeah, it's about the Big Show, the wrestler, and it's like a family comedy about him. On Tuesday, April 7th, The Last OG returns to PBS, and Terrace House Tokyo returns to Netflix. On Wednesday, April 8th, Liar comes to Sundance. On Thursday, April 9th, The Good Fight to CBS All Access, and High Score Girl, the anime, returns on Netflix. On Friday, April 10th, Bruise Brothers comes to Netflix, as does Il Processo. On Sunday, April 12th, the miniseries Belgravia comes to Epix. Bautista comes to PBS. Killing Eve comes to AMC and BBC America. It's coming to both channels. That's early. It was supposed to be April 26th. It got pushed forward because of the coronavirus and everything, and also because of the delay for The Walking Dead. So The Walking Dead's new spin-off series got delayed, and Killing Eve got pushed forward.
What a shame.
And then Insecure comes to HBO and Run to HBO as well. Interestingly enough, Killing Eve was created by Phoebe Waller-Bridge, who also did Run. So she's going to have 2 shows starting on the same night.
Oh, wow. Okay. Okay.
On Monday, April 13th, The Baker and the Beauty comes to ABC, Paradise Lost comes to Spectrum, and American Dad returns to TBS. On Wednesday, April 15th, American Housewife comes to ABC, Ms. America miniseries comes to Hulu, What We Do in the Shadows returns to FX. Cannot wait for that. I'm super excited
that's going to be amazing. Yeah.
Outer Banks comes to Netflix. On Thursday, April 16th, In the Dark comes to the CW, or returns to CW, I should say, and Fada returns to Netflix. On Friday, April 17th, Bosch returns to Amazon Prime for what I believe is its final season, and #BlackAF comes to Netflix. That is, I believe, that's the next show from the creator of Blackish, who did one of those big overall deals with Netflix.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I remember, he signed a deal with Netflix and ditched ABC.
Yeah, a bunch of people did these big deals with Netflix. There was a small stretch of time which there's Ryan Murphy, Shonda Rhimes, and this guy as well, and some others I think too, had all signed these contracts with Netflix. And so his first show is #BlackAF. It sounds very much like Blackish, just like in the title, like the way it's presented, the way it's written and stuff. It's very interesting. But it's it's going to be his first show for Netflix. On Monday, April 20th, The Midnight Gospel comes to Netflix. And that's it. That's what we got for the next couple weeks. As I mentioned, next week is Advocates of Great Television. It's our 250th episode. We're excited about that. And if you're listening to this and you already heard at the beginning of the podcast the announcement of what shows we are going to be discussing on Advocates. So yeah, if you want to join in on that discussion, watch those shows when you listen to this podcast. Watch those shows. And then before we record on next Monday, which is the 13th. So before the 13th, hit me up on Twitter at Tyson Gifford or Will at Voxel Hero and ask a question or make a comment that you want us to address about the shows that we are going to be talking about on Advocates. And we'll talk about that on the show. So thank you everybody for listening. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm at Tyson Gifford. You can follow Will. He is at Voxel Hero. You can check out our Facebook page and our YouTube channel as well as our site, thetotalscreen.com. You can subscribe to this podcast through any major podcast client like iTunes or Pocket Cast, and the entire backlog of our podcast is available on our YouTube channel. Thank you everybody for listening. Good night.
Good night.
If you would like to reach out to us and make a comment, send an email to contact@thetotalscreen.com. Stay tuned to The Total Screen for the very best